Welcome to the Dental Decoders Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Welcome, Decoders! Today is a super special episode of the Dental Decoders Podcast that promises to be nothing short of transformative. Today we have a true powerhouse in the world of entrepreneurship and personal growth joining us. He's an entrepreneur, a dynamic speaker, the brilliant mind behind a top-rated podcast, the Growth Now movement, a top 8 podcaster to follow by Inc. magazine, featured in Thrive Global, and recognized as an icon of influence in the new media space. Our guest's impact is nothing short of extraordinary. His podcast has transcended borders, reaching over 100 countries every week. And that's just the beginning. Through his company, Podbrand.io, he's empowered countless individuals to elevate their brands and businesses through the art of podcasting. He may or may not have contributed to the creation of this very podcast, but he's not just about making digital waves. He's also passionate about real life connections and transformation. As the host and creator of the sought-after event Growth Now Summit Live, he's brought together entrepreneurs and forward thinkers, creating a space where dreams take flight. In today's episode, we're talking all things secrets of work-life balance, a topic close to the heart of myself and every busy dental practitioner. Our guest will also share insights on how to prioritize filling your own cup, even amidst a busy practice, and he'll reveal the incredible power of having the right people in your corner. We already know you're going to take away so many amazing tips from this episode, so please don't forget to subscribe, review, and share to help us grow our community of dental decoders. Get ready for a conversation that's about life, balance, and most importantly, growth. Our extraordinary guest, Justin Schenck, is here to light the path to a thriving practice and a fulfilled life. Hi, Justin. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Dental Decoders Podcast.
Brittany, I'm so excited to be here. I'm a big fan of yours, as you know, and so I'm excited to have this conversation. And hopefully, I say one or two things that your dental community will understand, because I am not in the dentist community, but I'm excited to be introduced to him.
Yeah, we talked obviously off camera a little bit about that. One of my goals with this show is to bring in guests who are not traditionally involved in the dental industry, as dentists are starting to view their businesses more as businesses and less as just a medical practice. I'm really excited to be able to bring in some awesome business minds, one of those being yours.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I was saying before we hit record as well, like I used to sell to medical practices, not in the dental industry, but in other industries. And I learned then, and we're talking, 10 years ago or whatever, but like I learned then that for the first time I realized that doctors and dentists and people in this field, they're business people, right? Like they have a skill, but there's so much business around it that they have to work on and critique and fix. And they're in sales and they're in marketing and they're in all these different avenues. And I love the idea that you're bringing in people from the outside, because and you know this about me, like I'm a big believer in you can learn from every single person you come in contact with. And not only that, getting out of your lane and taking your blinders off and seeing how the world is adapting and moving as the world evolves very, very quickly, that changes the game for so many people. And that's why you doing this for dentists is such a game changer.
Thank you. I obviously work with a lot of dentists, and I'm starting to work with younger dentists who are coming into the industry fresh out of school, who are like younger than me now, which hurts a little, but they're all very business mindset and very business driven. That's the lane that they want to be in. They love clinical dentistry and helping people, but they want to run it like a business, which is super smart. And I think it's kind of necessary when you come out of dental school with $500K in debt. So I think that kind of bridging that gap, and yeah, we're still going to talk clinical dentistry on certain episodes of the show, but bridging the gap and talking more about the business side of it, I think is going to be super helpful. So I'm glad that you get to be a part of that. So with that being said, a lot of the people coming into the industry are younger, they're in debt, they're trying to hustle really hard to get out of that debt, they're trying to build their practices. Work-life balance is a thing that just doesn't exist. And I think it's a myth in general. Some seasons you hustle, some seasons you relax. But one thing that I've learned from you and that I've tried really hard to implement in my life are some of the tools that you use to promote work-life balance. You got kids now, you're a new dad, you've got a wife, you've got a million different business avenues on your plate. How do you balance all of that and still have time to be the dad, be the husband?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So to kind of put it in context for people listening, I'm not a new dad to newborns and or toddlers. I'm now a stepdad to a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and have been in that role in some way, shape, or form for the last 5 years. But I think the reality is you have to set yourself up for success in the beginning. Like, a lot of people go, well, I want the work-life balance, but I want the success in my business. But the problem is the success in your business is always going to be there, right? The next thing you have to do, the next obstacle, the next check mark, the next thing on my to-do list is always going to be there. Your wife, husband, partner, kids aren't going to come to you and be like, hey, I'm on your to-do list, right? And so it's a lot easier to go, hey, let me check this off. Let me check this off. And you get caught in this rat race. And so I look at everything from a lens of, if this is going to be added to my plate, how can I find the balance in my life? If that's possible, then I'll explore it, right? And the understanding that I now have the control to do that, right? Because I've been doing it for a number of years. I've been able to build businesses where my finances are good and I don't have to worry about the next dollar. So when you first start out, you have to just stay true to your schedule. And so I always say, when you look at a calendar every single week or every single month, however you're planning out your day, I always put the non-negotiables first. What are the non-negotiables in your life, right? Is it date night? Is it time with your kids? Is it making sure you get to your kids' dance recital or baseball game? Is it whatever, right? And you put those in your calendar first, and they're your non-negotiables. They don't move. You're going to be there, and you're going to be there 100% because it's on your calendar, right? Like, you're not straying away from work that needs to be done because you chose to be there in that moment. And then the second thing is shifting your mindset to be present at all times. When you're present at all times, not only are your relationships going to grow and get better, your business will thrive as well. Because when you're present in your work, because you know you were there for your loved ones, so therefore, when it's time to work, you can work and your brain's not wandering off to the next thing. You're going to execute your to-do list a lot faster when you're present in those moments. And I say all the time, like, I work a couple hours a day, right? It all depends on the day. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4. If it's a super busy day, I'm working 6 hours. I'm at my desk for 6 hours, right? But that's rare. But the reason I can do that is because when I sit down, I do my work. I don't stare at my phone. I don't sneak out for a snack. I don't do any of those things. I sit down and I get the work done. And when it's done, it's done. And I don't have to worry about it. And then before I leave my desk for the day to go to the next day, I make a to-do list and say, hey, what do I have to do tomorrow? And I've said this when we were together in Chicago. I said, look, like, there's always going to be more to do as an entrepreneur. You just have to have the discipline to say, hey, look, that's for tomorrow and that's okay. And now I'm going to go be present with my loved ones or be by myself. Like, whatever your day looks like outside of work, just be present in that moment.
That has been one of the most uncomfortable shifts for me. I have my to-do list that I write down the things that I'm going to do that day. And then when the last one's checked off, I close the laptop, I leave. And it's like, it feels like nails on a chalkboard when it first starts. I'm like, there's 1,000 other things on my like mini to-do list that I want to do. So it's been a super uncomfortable transition for me, but the benefits have been phenomenal. I actually do sit down and get my work done, which is great. And I like what kind of possessed me to start the whole shift, obviously, other than you just telling me that I need to, is my daughter was like, hey, I haven't spent any time with you this week. And I'm like, oh, that hurts. Like, that sucks. So made that pivot. It's been uncomfortable and it's been a thing to push through, but I'm glad that I'm at the point now where I'm feeling comfortable to do that. And I think that applies to anybody that's in a practice too. You kind of have this mentality that you have to be open and seeing patients from like 6 o'clock in the morning until 6 or 7 o'clock at night because people want to come in to see you on a schedule that works for them. But you have to set those boundaries when you're building those schedules too, because your patients are always they're going to be there, whether it's at 8 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night. So you have to set those boundaries early on when you're setting your practice hours too, and hustle a little, but have that balance or you're going to wind up being that overworked, burnt out dentist at the end of the day for sure.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up too. And like, because I get it, right? When your doors are open, you feel like you have to be there at all times. Like, let's make it convenient. People work till 5, whatever. First of all, since COVID, we're in a flexible schedule world. Like, people are able to leave their home desk, because most people are working remotely still to this day, to go to a doctor's appointment companies, as we evolve, are becoming more understanding of that. But not only this, here's the solution to overcoming the fear of not being open when people want to get there. Go above and beyond in everything else you do. Set the environment in your office to be a place where people want to come, right? Make sure how your people in your office greet your customer better than any other place they've ever been. Make them feel welcome into a place where most people are afraid of the dentist. By the way, I'm 39 years old. I've never had a cavity, so I'm not afraid of dentists, and I enjoy going to the dentist. But with that being said, a lot of people have that fear. So how do you make them feel warm and welcome? And if you're able to set your space up in that way, they'll show up whenever the heck you tell them to show up. Like if you're like, we're only open 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., the people will show up because you set it up the right way. And I think it's a misconception to think like, well, no, we need to be open. The reality is you don't. You can set your own hours. I have a chiropractor who Brittany, you and I know, his hours are only during business hours, right? There's no after hours. There's no before hours. They take a long lunch for him and his staff to make sure his staff is happy and they can greet the customers at a high level. So they're even closed during lunch hours, which a lot of times it's like, hey, let's stay open during lunch so people can come in. But guess what? He is one of the most thriving chiropractic offices in the state of Pennsylvania, if not in the Northeast, because they set everything else up the right way. And so it's really about reverse engineering your own limiting beliefs on why you need to be open, right? There are other things you can look at and other things you can do to make sure you're serving your customer at such a deep level that no matter what, they're loyal to the end.
For sure. I want to circle back a little bit. You said something along the lines of everybody hates to go to the dentist, and a stat that you may not be aware of is the dental industry in general has some of the worst mental health and the highest suicide rate of any industry in the world because everyone hates to go to the dentist. And I think that if you are building a practice that goes above and beyond for your patients, and people actually maybe not love going to the dentist, but they don't hate going to the dentist anymore, I think that's going to pay out tenfold in your mental health as well. In addition to building the schedule around something that works for your life so you can have those boundaries between your job and your home, again, going to kick that in high gear and really help boost that mental health piece. Another thing that could potentially help dentists in that mental health aspect is the people that they're surrounding themselves with. And I know that's something that you're very well versed in. So could you tell us a little bit about your 5 people that you think people should always have in their corner?
Yeah, for sure. And so to speak to what you were just saying before I get into the 5 people, I did know that. I did know the suicide rate was the highest out of all professions or all medical professions. I'm not sure of the statistic, but it's super high in the dental industry. And I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to touch on that. And the way to avoid that is to make sure, and I say this often, is to make sure your cup is full. When all you're doing is draining yourself to make sure your practice is running, to make sure you make that extra $10,000, to make sure you get that next thing billed, which you take care of for people, to do all those things, right? Like, you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself first, and nothing else gets done unless you're taken care of. Because the last thing we need is to lose another person to suicide or mental illness or whatever else may come along with it. I'm sure, on the same note, I'm sure addiction's very high in the industry and so on and so forth, because you need to escape. Well, why not create the life that you want along with this beautiful practice that you built? So I'm glad you brought that up. And I think a way to make sure that our mental health is always at top notch is to make sure we're surrounded by the right people. When I was 19 years old, I heard that famous quote, "You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And immediately I was like, I need to get rid of all my friends. I need to go find 5 millionaires, go hang out with them so I can become a millionaire, right? Because that's what drives you when you're 19. Like, I just want to go make a boatload of money and buy cool things. And then quickly realize that why would 5 millionaires want to hang out with me, some broke, idiot 19-year-old, right? And so I very quickly swept that under the rug, that quote. And it kept coming up. And the reality is it's such a famous quote because it's true. And I didn't realize it until I already created success. And I looked back at my life and I went, let me kind of reassess and revisit this quote of "You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And I realized that I always had a core group of 5 people as like my backup, people that traveled the world with me, as far as like they were always in the back of my mind, pushing me, making sure that I was successful. And I realized that they weren't always the same 5 people as I grew and evolved, but they always played the same 5 roles. And so these are the 5 roles that I recommend every single person have in their life. And then I'll explain why it's so important after I say the 5. But the first person is your cheerleader, right? So the cheerleader is the person who they make you feel like when you get off the phone with them or after you have coffee with them or whatever, they make you feel like you can run through a brick wall. Like they make you feel like untouchable superhero and just those amazing people, right? You call them with your idea and you're like, I think this is $1 million idea. And they go, no, it's $1 billion idea, Justin, because you're the one running it. Like that type of person is your cheerleader. The second person is your bruiser. This is the person who pushes back on your ideas, who questions you and the decisions that you're making. And they do it from a place of love to make sure you're guided and pointed in the right direction every step of the way. Somebody who might challenge you on your health, people who might challenge you on the fact that, hey, are you taking care of yourself? Are you really taking care of yourself? That person who might make you feel a little uncomfortable. And I think that person's probably one of the most important, but also the person most people avoid, right? Because nobody wants a friend who questions them or pushes them. And you know my bruiser, who is Justin Cavanaugh, Coach Cav, as most people know him. He's one of the toughest people I know, but I wouldn't be where I am without him. And that's just facts. The third person is your softie. This is that shoulder to cry on, right? Like as things fall apart, you need to go somewhere and let it out. Like I'm a big believer in feeling your emotions, finding out why you feel that way and moving forward, but you have to let them out. And so that softie is that shoulder to cry on. And then they help you kind of stand back up and brush yourself off and move forward. The fourth person is a mentor. I look at mentor a little bit differently than most people. I believe a mentor is somebody who has something innate in them that you want more in yourself. So my mentor is a guy named Fabio Viviani. A lot of people know him from the show Top Chef. He owns restaurants all over the world now. They're doing about $300 million in business a year. I don't need to make $300 million a year. I definitely do not want to be in the restaurant industry. God bless anybody who's in it. But he is the greatest giver I've ever met in my life. He's always willing to give as much as he possibly can, no matter how busy he is. He tries to just give as much as possible. And although I feel like I give a lot, I want to give more. I want to get to a place where I can give more. And that's why he's a mentor to me. And the fifth person is a coach. I believe at any given time, you should be financially invested in your future, whether that's a business coach, a life coach, a relationship coach, a spiritual coach. I've had them all. Literally, like throughout my life, I've had them all. And so I really believe that you should have a financial investment in your future because it holds your back up against the wall to move forward and become a better version of yourself. And so those are the 5 people that I realize that if you have them in your corner, if you're conscious of who these people are and you utilize them in a way that you're not only receiving from them, but you're giving them as much as you possibly can, life's a lot easier, right? Those tough moments are a lot easier because you get back up faster. The wins are better because you have this core group of people who cheered you on the whole way and can celebrate with you. And it just makes life a lot smoother and it creates a great health in all of your relationships, even outside of that 5. And that is the game changer for so many people. If they can just find these 5 people, they're going to have exponential success, exponential happiness, exponential joy throughout their life because they decide to have these 5 people.
You want to guess which of those 5 you are for me, Justin?
I don't know. I'm going to guess I'm your bruiser. Am I your bruiser?
I mean, technically you're my coach, but if you weren't my coach, if you weren't my coach, I think you'd definitely be my bruiser. Nobody ever tells me that my ideas need to be rethought or like gives me any sort of constructive criticism ever, except for you. So you're the last person that I want to go talk to, but always the first person that I know that I'm supposed to go talk to when I've got things that I want to check out. So
yeah. You know, it's so funny because I always wanted to be the cheerleader. I always wanted to be and by the way, people think I'm the cheerleader when they listen to my podcast or they see me speak on a stage, mm-hmm. Like they think I'm the cheerleader because I do love seeing people win. Like that's mm-hmm. true. But I'm also very quick to go, that's kind of a dumb idea. Like, why are you looking at it that way? Like, you should look at it this way, or you're making it a lot harder than it actually is, or whatever the case may be. So I've always wanted to be the cheerleader because that's the fun version. Like, everybody wants to be Chuck Balsamo, right? Like, everybody wants to be Chuck. And by the way, if you don't know who Chuck is as you're listening to this, go find him on the internet. You can listen to him on my podcast, whatever. Like, Brittany should have him on this podcast. He's a great human being. Everybody wants to be that person. But we all have this innate thing inside of us that tells us who we are. And through and through, I'm a bruiser because I just don't like excuses. I don't like BS. I don't like to waste time. And if you're like that, you're a bruiser. And a lot of times a bruiser is the best coach, in my opinion, because they're going to be able to kind of steer you in the right direction. Whereas a cheerleader can puff your chest and help you make that next big leap, which is important in life. And they can be good coaches too. But I really believe that a bruiser is that person that is a must in your life. And I encourage people who have them already and who are afraid to talk to them, go talk to them. And the bruiser could be your dad, the bruiser could be your mom, the bruiser could be whoever. Like for a long time in my life, my bruiser was my aunt. Through my late teens, early 20s, she was the one who called me on my BS. And so just be aware of those people and spend time with them and kind of see how that can guide you out of whatever misery you're in currently.
For sure. I am a bruiser myself. So
really?
I can relate to all of you. Oh yeah. I have to try and be a softie for my husband because I realize that I'm kind of a butthead to him sometimes. I'm like, really? You think that's the most? So I'm trying to scale it back and be like his softie at the very least. But no, I'm 100% a bruiser. I take no BS. I've been through too much stuff and overcame too many things to have listen to people give me silly excuses. So definitely that's me.
Yeah, by the way, the worst thing I ever did was come up with these 5 people and name them, because my wife has said to me often, like, right now I don't need you to be my bruiser, I need you to be my softie. And to have that open dialogue is important, especially my wife is my softie, so it makes it easy for me. Like it's not easy being married to me because I am a bruiser. I'm a problem solver. And sometimes, especially when you're married, you bring your problems to somebody because you just want them to vent. They want you to vent with them. But I'm like, no, just solve the problem. And I'm not always the best person to bring those problems to, for sure.
To be fair, most husbands in general, bruiser or not, want to solve the problem when you vent. So I think that's just true. It comes with your gender.
That's true. It's true.
So as we wrap today's episode of Dental Decoders Podcast, we always like to end with our signature question, which is, what was your decoding moment or the secret code that you were able to crack that helped you skyrocket your career?
Wow. That's a really, really good question. I think for me, it was going back to what we talked about earlier with filling your cup first. I was always a giver. I was always a fixer. I was always the person in my relationships, in my businesses, even when I was an employee, I would just drain myself in order to pour into others to make sure they were happy. And I ask a signature question on my show, which is a 2-part question. First part is, what's your definition of success? Second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself? And I realized I've now done over 500 episodes. I realized there was a common thread behind the second part of it, those 3 things. And those 3 things, those people, it was always something to take care of themselves, right? It was always like meditation or working out or spending time with my wife or learning something new. And what I did was I started to put some of those things into my life and make them non-negotiables. And so I do 4 things every single day that are non-negotiables to me that fill my cup. And when I started doing that in a time where I was like, I don't have time to do this. I'm trying to build a business. I'm broke. I don't know what I'm doing. Like everything is falling apart around me. When I started to put these things into my life, which was a number of years ago at this point, everything else became easier. The work became easier. People were drawn to me. People wanted to pay me more money. Because when you are filling your cup, you show up a lot happier. You show up a lot with a lot more enthusiasm and less desperation. And when you can show up like that, people want to be around you. People want to do business with you. And I would say that when I first started to fill my cup and realize that what's in my cup is for me and what overflows is for everybody else, that's what changed the game for me. And that, honestly, like if I never did that, I'd probably be back being an employee somewhere, being drained and unhappy. And so that would be the game changer for me.
Awesome. So one thing I want to mention that's completely irrelevant to what we were just talking about, but kind of ties in. When this episode comes out, we're going to be very close to Chicago Midwinter, which is a huge dental conference in Chicago. So back to Fabio being your mentor. He has a freaking awesome restaurant in Chicago that I want to make the trip back to Chicago just for that. So if you're listening to this episode and you're going to Midwinter, make a reservation now because you're going to want to go there.
Yeah, I will say this. So he's actually has, I think there might be 4 now, but I know of 3 for sure in Chicago. We went to Bar Sienna. No, we went to Sienna Tavern, was the restaurant that we went with the mastermind. He also has Bar Sienna, which is a little bit more low key. Like Lauren and I went there for lunch when we were in Chicago. And then if you like super fancy, there's probably the greatest steakhouse in the country. It's called Prime and Provision. And that is also his, like all in the heart of Chicago. Great places. Like, honestly, like if you guys are going for a dental conference, do a meetup there because it's just a cool place even to just grab a drink.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dental Decoders meetup, I'll post some information on our Facebook page, but I think we're going to do it. Definitely a Fabio restaurant.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing so much of that information with us and for joining us for today's episode. I appreciate you taking the time so much.
Brittany, this is great. Thank you so much for having me. And anybody listening, like Brittany, so we talked a lot in this episode about how, balance your work life and make sure you're making decisions to make life easy for you. There are times in business when you have to spend a little bit in order to grow. You have to hire people in order to expand. And it might hurt your wallets for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever the case may be. But Brittany, you offer a service to dentists that changes the life for them. You take work away from them while putting money back in their pocket. Like, that's a no-brainer, right? And so and I know you didn't do this on purpose, and you probably hate the fact that I'm doing this on your podcast, and you can edit it out if you want to. But the reality is, like, the thing we talked about today, you solve for people. It's that next easy step to go, okay, like, I don't want to do this work anymore. It is a time suck. It's taking time away from me and my loved ones. It's taking time away from me. And, I love cigars. It's taking time away from me and having a cigar and whatever the case may be. But the reality is, like, make the investment now, whether it be in Brittany or anybody else. Go hire the right people to take the work off your plate so you can find that work-life balance, have a little bit better of a mental health as you navigate life, because we need you here. And I'm just grateful to have this conversation. And now I want to go to the dental conference in Chicago because I just love Chicago. So let's find a way to get me to speak there. But with that being said, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I did not ask him to say any of that stuff either, just so we're clear. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders Podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.